Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here today. We hope you're all healthy and safe during these times. Joining us virtually on the UT Austin side of things, we have students, faculty, and partners out of College of Natural Sciences, Cockrell, Moody School of Communication, Pharmacy, Jackson School of Geosciences, and a few friends zooming in from Austin Technology Incubator, Texas State, and Harvard School of Public Health. So thank you for joining us. We want to start out with a few housekeeping rules. This is a live event. We'll be taking live Q&A throughout the conversation. All attendees are muted and video off before then. The chat is open, so please be respectful in this space. And please post your questions in the chat throughout so the moderator can call on you. So let's get to it then. Welcome. My name is Ashley Jennings, and I serve as the Managing Director of the Texas Innovation Center. We serve the new venture and technology commercialization arm and leg of the University of Texas at Austin. We'd love to hear from you, so please connect with us at innovation@utexas.edu. We're excited today to be joined by our teammates and leaders out of the Office of Technology Commercialization who also want to hear from you. So please do reach out to OTC at licensing@otc.utexas.edu after the talk. Joining us is Dr. Kristen Falkenstein, Technology Licensing Specialist with a focus on the life sciences portfolio, Dr. Chris Wolgamuth, Senior Tech Licensing Specialist on the physical sciences side of the house, and Dr. Robert Vilwalk, Senior Technology Licensing Specialist for OTC, overseeing all things software. In this role, Dr. Vilwalk is responsible for working with faculty members to manage their intellectual property portfolios by evaluating the commercial potential of inventions, marketing technologies to prospective licensees, negotiating IP licenses, and enabling startup formation. Previous to this role, he served as Associate Director of the Center for Electrochemistry at UT, where he developed research funding from government, industry, and private sources and facilitated researchers in the commercialization process. Prior to that, he was principal in his own consultancy, specializing in chemical engineering, process development, and intellectual property management. He has held senior level research positions in startups, Golden Bear Ceramics and Mobius Technologies, and has conducted product and process development for several different groups within Dow Chemical. Bob holds 9 US patents and has a bachelor's in polymer science and engineering from Case Western Reserve University and a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. So welcome OTC team and welcome Bob.
Thank you, Ashley. It's really great to have this opportunity to talk to the Innovation Center and everyone gathered here and such as it is during COVID. But what we're going to do is I have maybe 20 slides or so. I want to go over a couple of topics, and then as Ashley mentioned, I'm on the call. Chris Wolgamuth is on the call. Kristen Falkenstein is on the call, and we can. What I'd like to do is sort of generate some questions, and then we can get to a question and answer period at the end of these slides. So let me jump in with some slides here and tell you what we're going to say. Okay, so these are just generally the topics I'm planning to cover here. You know, right off the bat, this is really aimed at UT researchers and what to do when you have an invention or you have some software that needs to go out of the university, and how we approach that and how we look at that. So what are our steps in protecting and licensing our inventions, and also what's in it for you as an author or an inventor. And then at the conclusion, I'll get into some common issues around releasing and licensing software from the university. So first, a little bit about the Office of Technology Commercialization. We're a university department organized under the Vice President for Research, but we're also a service organization that works with the research community to commercialize ideas and advise on anything that has to do with intellectual property. We're really the only organization on campus that files patents also, so that all that work comes through our office. And so we're also a professional organization that works with you know, reaching out from the university, working with industry and venture capitalists and other funding sources to commercialize UT inventions. So we have a lot of different stakeholders in what we do. but a lot of what we do is established by the UT Board of Regents Rule 90101, and there's a link there. You can Google Regents Rule 90101 if you want to get into the nitty-gritty details of all that, but that is sort of the guiding policy and document that we work with. So at the highest level, what we do is tech transfer. We're a tech transfer office, and so we work with patents and copyrights and IP of all kinds, and we transfer that out into the world by means of license agreements. And these are contracts, essentially, that give certain rights to certain IP, and these can be very broad or very narrow, and they can be very specialized. And that's the main activity we do and the way we transfer things out. And license agreement can be with a startup company, it can be with an established company. That can take lots of different forms. We can license various kinds of IP, and we'll talk about this some more. These are the kinds of IP we work with, primarily patents, and I'll talk about what a patent is and why it's important and how we go about this process, but also copyrights. And copyrights, essentially, in the context that we work with them, are usually software. So we're talking about source code for software, or the binary, the executable applications, that sort of thing. But copyrights can also be created at UT by an institutional project. Say there was some incoming funding specifically for a film to be made or something like that. Then we end up with some copyright IP that may be owned by the university, and our office will work with that as well. And then we also work with some data sets and databases that fall under copyright and can be valuable licenses as well. One thing we don't work with is trademarks. We get asked this a lot, but trademarks include branding and the Longhorn logo and this logo you see down here at the bottom of my slide. These come through the trademarks office at UT, which is actually handled through athletics, and which makes sense if you think about it a little bit. The Longhorn logo goes on a lot of things that don't really have to do with commercializing technology. So we primarily deal with patents and copyrights. Let me talk about our overall process then. So this is sort of expanding on the two bubbles I had earlier. So this really starts with your research as a researcher at UT and communication with our office. So we really welcome questions and any insight we can get into your research early in the process to help us guide how this is going to go with respect to patents specifically. And I'll explain why that's important as we go, but there's some decisions that need to get made about technology as it develops and when to file patents. And it's important that we get involved as early as possible so we can make good decisions about that. So really what gets the ball rolling is an invention disclosure, and every university and company has some sort of invention disclosure form where this process gets started. And this is a document that asks all the specific questions we need to begin to move the process forward. Primarily what we're looking for at this stage when we get the disclosure is we're trying to understand what would be the commercial product, because this is the main difference between how universities and tech transfer offices look at intellectual property versus industry. If it's your startup company or if you're a large company, how you would look at intellectual property. At the university, we're not going to make a product. We're not going to sell a service that's based on your research. We're not in the petroleum industry. We're not in the pharmaceutical industry. We need an outside partner to take these things to market. So we're looking at these disclosures. We're trying already to determine what would be the commercial product and what's sort of a business plan or the right industry and product to move this into. So we're doing technical analysis. We're looking at the type of invention, at what stage is it, what's the strength of the data, is it really enabled? Can we really teach someone how to do this at this point, or does it need to cook some more? Does it need more research? And we do some market analysis. We look at what the product might be worth in the competitive landscape. And we look at a legal analysis. We look what we need third-party IP to do this. Are there any issues with ownership? Do we own it outright? Are there co-owners? There's a lot that goes into this decision, and at this point we make a decision about should we patent it, or how should we protect it? If it's perhaps it's a pure software thing and we're going to protect that with copyright, or perhaps it's a mixed patent and software. It may be pharmaceutical again, or petroleum industry. These are all handled a little differently. So what we're ultimately looking for is a company that's going to be able to take this to market, and we do that with a license agreement. OTC will negotiate and finalize a license agreement, and we're authorized to sign for the Board of Regents on these license agreements, and that gets us to revenue and commercialization for some of the technologies that make it through this whole process. So that's sort of the high-level view of the things that we work on here. So let me pause there and talk a little bit, step back and talk about what are patents, and just at the most basic level. A patent is the start of filing a patent is the start of a time-consuming and expensive process, and so we don't want to enter into this lightly. But what it is, it's really a bargain that's offered by the government, and the bargain is this: you tell us exactly how to do your invention, or how to make your machine, or what exactly your composition of matter is, these kinds of things. You disclose the best way to do it, exactly how to do it, and if it's truly new, the bargain is you can now prevent anyone else from doing that for 20 years. So it doesn't give you the right to do anything. It's a defensive right. It gives you the right to keep others from doing it. So, and the mission of the university, that is not necessarily like, we're not going to make a product. So that's something that is of value to someone else because it's a defensive right. So that's a lot different than a trade secret. A trade secret is valuable because it's a secret, right? And the patent is almost the exact opposite of that. It's tell everybody exactly how to do it, and get this defensive right back. And it's different from copyrights. I'll talk about copyrights in more detail later. Copyrights are really the tangible expression of the idea, whereas a patent is on the concept and the way it's presented to the world, and the process and the method by which it works. And trademarks we talked about earlier as brands and logos and that sort of thing. So it's different from all of these things. So one of the things I alluded to earlier is being in contact with OTC and good communication. And one of the reasons that that's important is what we're trying to avoid is a public disclosure of something that would be a valuable patent before we get to file it. And this is the reason for that. When we're arguing with the patent office about what should be in the patent claims the bounds of what we're protecting with this patent must be novel. And in the patent examiner sense, novel means no one's heard of this before, so it can't be publicly disclosed. We want to avoid a disclosure that really teaches someone how to do this, an enabling disclosure, before we file a patent application. And the instant problem with that is that we would lose foreign patent rights as soon as it's disclosed. In the US, we have a little bit of a grace period. We have 1 year, but these foreign rights can be pretty valuable, especially if we're talking about something like a drug compound or something that's going to be broadly applied across the world, not just in one jurisdiction. So listed here below are some common types of public disclosures that can get in the way of patentability. And it really depends on what's being disclosed. But in the case of a journal publication, that's usually the way that researchers work, is we put our best foot forward there. We really teach how to do things. We might even speculate about future uses for our technology in a journal publication. So those are definitely something we'd like to get filed before the journal publication goes out. And these can go out by hitting the website or actually getting published. And a lot of people put articles up on Archive or GitHub or some of these, or your own website. There could be information going out that way that can get in the way of patentability. Your presentations at conferences or industry meetings, yes, but also maybe public meetings on campus could be an enabling disclosure. Your PhD defense is not private, so that's something to watch out for as well. And grant proposals, we get questions about grant proposals quite a bit. Usually the federal agencies, NIH, NSF, and the like, are usually confidential reviews, so it wouldn't be a public disclosure at the time of the proposal, but that abstract may publish as soon as it's funded. So we do want to be aware of that stuff. There are some grant proposals that come from industry that look look innocuous, but are not. They are actually public disclosures at the time of filing that grant proposal. So these are all things that we're happy to advise on as things come up. So I think a good time to talk to us is when you're preparing a manuscript and you have concerns about whether it's disclosing IP or whether there's new IP in it. When you're getting your abstract ready for a meeting, industry meeting or a conference like that, you're putting that proposal in. It's a fine time to just have a conversation with one of the licensing specialists at OTC and make a plan for how that IP is going to go. We don't necessarily need the invention disclosure at that early stage. And in fact, it's probably better to talk to us before going to the work of sending us the invention disclosure too. Okay, so all of that, why would a university file a patent? It provides a competitive advantage for a product or a service in the marketplace, but we're not going to sell those products or services. And so really the only reason is to find a company that can license it, that would turn it into a product or service. And we see this as really one of three pillars on how we get our research results into the world. Obviously, teaching and research and publishing of that research are well known to all of us, but tech transfer can really be the third way to get our results out. And in the case of some technologies, it's really the only way. If the product takes a lot of money and effort and investment to develop, then it's not going to get developed unless someone can protect that right for 20 years and know that their investment in making the product is going to pay off. So, pharmaceutical formulations and drugs leap to mind, but this applies also to many other industries. So in some cases, it might be better to not have a patent, and we can certainly evaluate that. That's something we evaluate at the disclosure stage when we're making that filing decision in the first place. So the last point on here is that the licensing revenue, anything we make from licensing patents, comes back to support research at UT, and it goes 50% of the licensing revenue after we pay our patent costs goes back to the Vice President for Research Office to support research at UT in general. I mentioned patent costs, so those come back to OTC so that we can continue to file on new technologies. And then the other 50% of that net goes to the inventors or the creators themselves. So this is really, I think, an amazing deal that happens at research universities, is that the inventors and creators participate in the licensing revenue that comes back to a university. And at UT, according to the Regents rules, right now, what our policy is to split it 50-50. There's lots of other versions of that, depending on which university you're at or you end up with. Sometimes the department will get a cut and the research VP will get a cut, that sort of thing. But this is not a deal you'll get in industry. If you go work for a big company, or maybe a startup would make some kind of deal like this, but most big companies, I used to work for Dow Chemical. When I filed a patent application there, I would get a silver dollar, and that would be that. So I'm not going to get any licensing revenue from Dow Chemical on that patent. So let's expand a little bit on just sort of the scale of this enterprise. So when we decide to file a patent, this is sort of the timing of how that works. Let's call month 0 when we've actually made the filing decision. We work with an outside attorney, we prepare a provisional patent application, and the cost of that really varies depending on how complex things are and what's the nature of the technology. But we like to file a provisional patent application that is pretty much a regular patent application. It's pretty much ready to go. So that's an investment of probably $4,000 to $14,000, and it can vary a little bit outside that, but it depends on the technology. So it's a decent amount of money for an initial investment, but that's going to be sort of a drop in the bucket by the time the patent is granted as far as these costs go. At month 12, we convert that to a full patent application. So it's not really even examined, that first application. So if we've done a good job on the first one, then the costs there are on the order of $5,000 to $10,000 again. I mentioned a PCT application. Those are those foreign rights. That gives us the ability to have patents in any country worldwide for a while. We can kind of have our foot in the door all over the world for that one kind of application. And so we often start with a provisional and follow with a PCT if those foreign rights are still available to us. And in this time between month 0 and 30, we have all the rights available around the world. And this is really our best efforts to market and license this technology are right here in this first 30 months. A licensee could pick this up at this point and have direct the prosecution, try to tailor the claims to the product they want to make, choose the countries in which this is really important. Maybe they want Korea, maybe they want Europe, maybe they want Canada, Mexico, or maybe those aren't important. So they can sort of control this, where it's going to go. And then when we get to month 30, the costs start to really skyrocket. And this is because each of these countries where you want to have the patent, each has to have their own patent examiner, their own patent attorney locally, and they're all looking at it individually. And so now you have all these applications going forward in parallel. And so at this point, we're looking for a licensee that supports those costs so that we can spend our limited patent budget on new technology. So this is really our window to get things licensed. This is the first 30 months. And then way out here in year 3 to 7, could be a little earlier, could be later. If all goes well, we get a patent granted. All right, so we're really working at the early stages of this to try to get things licensed to a company. So what's your role in all this? After filing, it's not just throw it over the fence and OTC does all this. We're going to market it and work to license it in this first 30 months. And if we find a licensee, they can pick up the costs. But the technologies that have active researcher involvement that aren't just sort of thrown over the fence are much more likely to get licensed. So, you know, the collaboration with OTC and also our patent attorney, maybe the licensees we're talking to, they're going to need technical explanations and trying to figure out how it fits in with their business model. You know, the help of the researchers there is really valuable in making that deal happen. And also in figuring out what needs to happen to get the technology to a stage where it has that value to a license. So there may be additional data and examples. That first 12 months between the provisional and the PCT filing are a really great time to get that as well. And we're trying to get a really broad and strong patent that has value to licensees. So this interaction with the researchers after the patent application is crucial to that. And this sort of hits that home a little bit more. What really makes licensable IP, as we step through these stages, and you know, not everything makes it all the way to a licensed technology, but we're really looking for strong patents with broad claims, supporting data and examples. The inventors, our UT inventors and researchers, if they've been networking with industry, if they understand sort of the problems and the unmet needs, and the research is sort of directed at those needs, then it's a lot easier to translate that to a product or service. It's usually not a solution searching for a problem, and it's almost never just a conceptual idea that we would file on. We want to flesh this out a little more and get it to something that's going to be licensable. So we'll work with you on that and kind of direct that. But a lot of things that don't get filed here at the beginning are because they're too conceptual, or they really aren't connected to a market need that we can identify a licensee for. Or it may just be a crowded space, and that particular patent isn't likely to have a license. I'm going to glance at the chat here and see. Okay, great. So at this point, I'd like to step into the topic of software and copyrights. So software is typically protected by a copyright, not a patent, although there are software patents, and we do file on certain software patents. We can talk more about that if there's questions, but the copyright is created automatically as soon as your code is created and fixed in a tangible form. And this applies also to written materials and lots of other things that are copyright protection. So, you know, even at the disclosure stage, sometimes we'll get the software disclosure in and we'll go, well, actually, this is a patent, and we'll work with it that way. So this is another way that we can help advise on the early stage. And Software copyrights can be licensed as well. So let's talk about what copyright is. Copyright's actually in the Constitution. And it gives to the authors certain rights in the works that they've created. So this is for, it could be literary, dramatic, computer software is basically treated as literature in copyright law. So it doesn't protect the idea, the concept itself. The idea of a Harry Potter book is not protected by copyright, but the Harry Potter book is protected by copyright, obviously. Methods and systems, these are all potentially patentable things, but the copyright is for that exact expression of it. So what are these rights? The owner of the copyright has this exclusive right. It's an exclusive right, like in patents, you can keep others from doing these things. You can keep others from reproducing the work, preparing derivative works. So this is in the context of software, it's copying software or taking the source code and adapting it to a new product or a new application, distributing copies, sending things, over the internet or file sharing. Perform publicly, this would include digital audio, and display publicly, which might impinge on software as a service models, that sort of thing. So these are the rights that come with a copyright, and these are the rights that we can license. We can license some of them. We can license them exclusively, non-exclusively in certain fields, that sort of thing. There's lots of ways to slice this up when we have a copyright asset. And the interesting thing about copyrights and software copyrights from a tech transfer point of view from universities is that often the product's already there. We don't need to go look for a product. The product is the software, depending on how far along it's developed. And there's not a lot of work and effort and money that needs to happen on the licensee side to turn that into a commercial item. So things can go a little faster, and they can go, in some cases, they're a little simpler with some of our software copyright licenses than they are with a patent. So a question comes up often is, who owns this copyright? So this is a matter of the copyright law as well, and it belongs to the author who created the work initially, except that if the author was hired to create that work, then it's a work for hire, and the employer is considered to be the author. And this is how the UT System Board of Regents ends up owning a lot of the software created at UT, and how it ends up coming through the licensing office to go out. There can be joint authors, and this is often the case in software, that we've got collaborators at other universities or non-UT people. And they can be co-owners of the copyright in the work unless there's some other agreement to the contrary. And so we often find ourselves making agreements with co-authors in order to get something cleaned up enough so that it's licensable. So what contributes to a valuable software copyright is a number of things, but what makes it licensable and valuable to a licensee is really, the first thing is to make sure that we really own what we're licensing, that we have the ability to do that. So that means it's been the UT authors are all the authors are UT authors, or there's been some work for hire agreement. Maybe we hired a developer, an outside developer. They've got a business services agreement with the university, and all of those address this work for hire language. And so that gets it to university ownership. Or we go and we get an explicit assignment document from outside authors in order to get clear UT ownership. We may owe things to our research sponsors in software. In fact, sometimes it's not uncommon that there's a research contract that says we are going to release this software in a certain way, possibly open source. So we need to be aware of the encumbrances we have from our research contracts when we license. And software is also sliced and diced and put together, with outside components, the open source components or third-party libraries, dependencies, that sort of thing. So we have to pay attention to what's in the software, and do we have all the rights we need to license it from there. So if we got those three things, we probably have something that's licensable. And some of the really successful ones I've listed over here on the right, Coincidentally, these are all actually out of aerospace, but we do get software from petroleum and all of our CNS department and computer science department, and all of Cockrell School. But these are, I think, interesting examples. The top one here, AMLS FastFRS, is a license of the application only, not the source code. And this is used all over the world to design automobiles for vibration and noise, you know, to make the cars better. And this has been a very successful license from UT, and it's supported by the authors for a long time. So that's kind of what generates the value in this particular license. GRID is a software-defined radio navigation receiver from Todd Humphrey's group, if you know about Todd. And this is actually licensed as source code, proprietary source code to specific companies that are interested in GPS signals and knowing their position to centimeter level accuracy. This is a pretty amazing piece of software, and it's been developed over about at least 10 years. Development is ongoing with it, so that's created a lot of value for UT as well. And then more recently, Astriograph, if you know Mariba Jha, who's very concerned with the number of satellites and objects in orbit, has got this software that helps understand and track and synthesize a very large, big data set of those kinds of objects. That software is licensed in two ways. It's licensed as an open source license, and since UT owns all the rights, we also license it in parallel commercially. So it's really an interesting and successful license that has allowed everyone the ability to get at this code and use it for their own purposes under a GPL license, but also has allowed UT to license in parallel commercially. So I brought up open source. I've got one more slide here on open source. There's lots of software that doesn't have this sort of ongoing support and maintenance, customization, plans for upgrade, that sort of thing. That's all fine as long as we've got these first three large categories: clear ownership, free of encumbrances and components. We can still make a good license of that and make good value of that. Often software and an associated patent might get licensed together also, and so there's just many ways this can work. And I welcome some questions in this. It really gets down to what people are interested in. So often UT would like to release software, and like I said, this may be part of our research agreements to send things out open source. And the Tech Transfer Office is definitely not opposed to that. We want to support the research mission of UT, and this is often the avenue that makes the most sense. So, but here are the common pitfalls that we really want to avoid when we release software. So the first part is, do we really own what we're releasing? Or we're releasing someone else's software? That's going to get us in trouble. So do we really own it 100%? Who are the authors? If they're all UT authors, does UT have any obligations to our research sponsors? And can we meet those and still do what we want to do with this software? Our outgoing license has to be compatible with any inbound licenses from open source components. And so we need to make sure we have the rights to distribute and do things the way we are. And the last one, this one's kind of sneaky. Most researchers can estimate the first three pretty well on their own, but there may be associated UT patents on, say, methods or processes that the software embodies, right? And if we're transferring the software for free, we may be undermining the value of those patents by basically offering a free patent license with this software, depending on the license it goes out with. So this one's kind of sneaky, and so what we really ask is that if software is going to be transferred outside of UT, that it comes through OTC for us to review it on a software disclosure form. And this gives us all the information to answer all these questions here on the top bullet items. And then the next step in that is, we'll review the disclosure form. we'll say yay or nay, or recommend a certain license based on that, and then ask for approval from the department chair. Then the software can go out on GitHub, and we can choose one of the licenses. These are the what I've listed here are a couple of the common open source licenses and the ones that we prefer for various reasons, and we can get into questions about that. The last one here is a UT research license, which is not really an open source license. That's a license that OTC is going to write that would give rights for research use. We sometimes look at humanitarian use on those, but research and academic use, non-commercial use, we can give broad permissions for those sorts of things, but still reserve commercial use, and that comes in handy in some cases, depending on the software. So how to get started with any of this? I'm getting ready to answer some questions here, and Kristen and Chris are joining me here, but you can contact the whole licensing team with this email address, licensing@otc.utexas.edu. Don't be shy about it. We don't mind. The person who's most connected to your question will hop on that and get back to you, so you don't need to figure out who to talk to exactly. But joining me today and from our life sciences side is Kristen Falkenstein, and from our physical sciences side is Chris Wolgamuth. And I've also listed here the link to our disclosure forms. You can just find those right on our website. There's a button there that says submit a disclosure, and you can follow your nose and find all these different disclosure forms. So these are my key takeaways for everyone. I would encourage you to check with OTC early on before public disclosures. Gosh, we sure like 3 months notice if we can have it, because we can really write a great patent application in that amount of time. But we can also move pretty quickly if we have to. It kind of makes our decision harder, because it's harder to get strong and broad claims when you're in a hurry like that. But check with us before public disclosures, check with us before releasing software, and contact us with any questions. And think about your research in terms of how it solves a market need or how it solves an industry problem. And we'll be well on our way to finding technology that's going to be really licensable. So with that, I'll stop, and we'll take on some questions.
Great. Thank you, Bob. This is Ashley. We had one question in the chat from James Burrow, and I know, Kristen, you answered it in the chat, but maybe we could talk through some examples. At what point between proof of concept and competitive advantage, practical prototype, should researchers approach OTC?
Yeah, so I did post an answer, and this is kind of from the life sciences perspective. So I'm happy to have Bob and Chris add anything that they'd like to, respective to kind of their areas of expertise. But from life sciences, we really don't think it's ever too early to come talk to us. You know, it may not be time to file a patent when you come talk with us, but the earlier we know about the research that you're doing and the technologies that you're developing, the easier it is for us to kind of help you through the process. So a lot of times the data that you need to, you know, publish a paper can be a little bit different than the data that's really important to give you a really strong patent position. And so a lot of times we'll have researchers come to us really early on when they're just getting some initial really exciting results and think that this is something that could end up being valuable or patentable. And when that happens, sometimes we'll just do a consult with an attorney, or we'll just talk through what we know about what types of data could be important. And it can help, you know, from the very beginning, developing a really strong position when it does come time to file or make that patentability decision. So kind of the long and short of it is that we don't think it's ever too early. We really love meeting with researchers and understanding what they're doing. And, you know, we can help you decide when it's time to actually do the work to fill out a disclosure form. We're happy to just talk through the research before that point and kind of help you with the process.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kristen.
I think there can be some hesitancy to talk to us at an early stage because, well, I don't want to get into all that mess with patents and stuff like that. And I think actually talking to us earlier avoids that. You know, we end up knowing more about what we're working with and what's coming and making a plan for it, rather than responding as rapidly as we can to the fact that something's going to go public in a day or two, right? It's much harder for us to make a good filing decision and file a good patent in that amount of time versus being involved in the process earlier on and understanding the best way to make a plan for this.
How does OTC assess new technologies on the physical science side of things?
This is Chris. I would say it's very similar to how Bob and Kristen described the process. Really across all the teams here, we address each technology independently and look at it from what's been developed to this point, what would need to be developed to get it to that next level. And we all have a lot of experience knowing and talking with companies already of what do they want to see as far as some research and some results. And then we can take that back if we already know, or if we have contacts, we can reach out to them and say, this is where we're at. What else would you like to see? And, you know, just have the conversations. We are all more than happy to talk to the inventors here about their technology, because we all come from that scientific background. So I think a lot of us kind of nerd out when we get new disclosures because we get to see some new stuff.
If an application is used Microsoft Access to create an application for UT internal use, but could be used by other departments or other organizations, such as another university in one of their departments, organizations, how would this fit into the copyright picture?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. So if you're using an application to create an application for internal use, so a lot of times when you're creating something on top of a platform, you need the platform in order to use what you've worked on. So the work that's UT's is what you've created on the platform, and that still can be licensed out, or permissions can be given to other organizations, that sort of thing, to work with it. If it's MATLAB is an example, right? So MATLAB's sort of a platform where you can create different things, and the program you create on that it belongs to the authors or their employer, and it can be transferred in various ways. The user is going to have MATLAB as well. If it's a sort of a standalone app you're creating, or this would apply to Access too. I think the user was going to need Access as well. There are cases where we need to look at the inbound license for the platform you're using to see if we have the rights to transfer the standalone application. And often we do, sometimes we don't, and we have to figure that out. So it is a good question, and it's going to come down to specifics. I think the internal use around UT is in the specific example this person's asking about is fine. Transferring to another university may be fine too, but we could delve into that if you like and sort it out. I think with Microsoft Access, I don't have really any concerns with that particular platform.
About the preferred open software licenses, is GPLv3 also okay, or just GPLv2?
So we try to use GPL2. And the reason that's been on the list and not GPL3 is one of the main differences is there's an explicit or an express patent grant in GPL3 that's not as clear in GPL2. This is to protect against accidentally sweeping in some unrelated UTIP or something even possibly related UTIP. That's the main reason we go with GPL2. That said, we have licensed things GPL3 in certain cases, and that's usually because something coming in forces us to do that. But if we have the choice, we'll go with GPL2, and we'll actually have GPL2 where it doesn't automatically update, and it'll stay GPL2. But that's the reason for that. It's the express patent clause. That's another reason also to prefer BSD3 or MIT over the Apache license when we're talking about permissive licenses, because the Apache license also has this express patent grant in it.
With a research perspective of publishing as quickly as possible, when in the patent process is it considered safe to publish but still have protected the novelty of the discovery?
I'll jump in on that. I think it's safe to publish once the patent application has been filed on what you're publishing. That's the short answer on that one. So it's just sending us a disclosure, an invention disclosure, doesn't offer any protection at all. It just gets the ball rolling on whether or not we're going to file. So it's that actual filing date of that provisional application, and what's protected is only what's in that provisional application. So when you go out and expand on that in your next paper, we might want to think about getting that into the patent application also before that goes public.
And Bob, how long does that take to get the provisional in place if you have a paper in progress?
Yeah, we can work quickly. If you're starting to draft your paper, that's a great time to talk to us, because then we have plenty of time to get the patent happening as you're drafting the paper, and they basically happen at the same time. So if you start early, great. If we find out that yeah, we submitted that a month ago and it's about to hit the internet because it's got approved, and we have 1 to 5 days and we're not sure how many, now we have a problem. So and we can file something, but what we file looks a lot like the paper and not much like the patent, and we don't end up with as strong of a patent. So yeah, we can work fast. It doesn't help us in being able to license it very much. So a couple of weeks would be great. A couple of months is fantastic. But my usual rule of thumb is when you start writing, you probably have enough to at least tell us what's going on, and maybe even write up the invention disclosure too. That might even help you write the paper.
What if the innovators establish a startup and want to license their software patent? Would the UT share be the same, 50%?
Yes, yeah, it still would be the same. So we deal with startups very frequently, and we license to startups frequently as well. And we treat those startups exactly as we would treat any company that's licensing from UT, whether they're associated with an inventor or not. With all of our licenses, we're flexible, and we think about terms and licenses that make the most sense for that specific company and their business plan. But as far as the inventor share goes, that's completely separate from who we're licensing to. So oftentimes you'll find that if you're dealing with us as an inventor that is forming a startup, that we will keep everything very separate. So our discussions with you on the UT side as an inventor, we treat them very much as just discussions with the inventor and not with the startup. And conversely, when we're talking about licensing terms with that startup, we put barriers in place to prevent conflicts of interest. And so while it seems like a complex situation in some cases, it's actually, we have some good policies in place for that. And that sharing is very separate from the startup, just as our conversations about licensing are.
If your technology or software will most likely only be available for sale internationally due to legal restrictions, would UT still be inclined to aid in the licensing process?
That's an interesting question. So I'm not sure what those restrictions would be, but I don't think we would go through the same process, right? So we would look at is this is there a market for it? Does it solve a problem? Is there a licensee that would like to pick this up and run with it? And if they're international, sure, yeah, we do agreements all over the world. So if it's a very specific thing, and now I'm thinking hypothetically, but let's say it's really only applicable in one country and it's not the U.S. Then we could approach the filing the patent with that in mind. Would still basically be the same process, though. I think the provisional allows, the U.S. provisional allows us a priority date, allows you to publish, gets out of the way of all of that for the researchers at the minimum of cost. And the PCT application, which is PCT is Patent Cooperation Treaty. So this is 100 and how many, Chris? 140 countries around the world, on that order.
153.
Okay, so most countries you'd be interested in commercializing something in are covered by that treaty. And so the PCT application, we'd probably still go that route. That would cover that country and all the others until we needed to nationalize. And then when we got to that nationalization point, that's really when you have to make the call about, is this really the only country we're going to proceed in? But our process would be the same, and aid in the idea of aiding in the licensing. But the licensing process would have to come through OTC if it's a university invention or it's university software. So yeah, we would treat it the same as anything else, I think, with that restriction.
So Bob, anything different for drug restrictions in this case?
Well, I'll ask Kristen to answer that one.
I'm not sure what you mean as far as drug restrictions go.
Oh, just the follow-up to the question that was asked.
Oh yeah, I mean, our process would still be exactly the same. If it's valuable somewhere in the world, then it's valuable to us and it's valuable to our inventors and it's valuable to the public. So just because it's not something that might get developed in the United States, if it is something that's important or valuable in another country, then it's something that we would still like to, help to move the research out of the university and to those who might need it. So I think no matter what the technology is, I think we would still look at it and go through the same process of determining licensability, patentability, and then deciding what the next steps would be.
How are inventors involved in the patenting process?
Great question. Yeah. So we rely on the inventors to help explain the invention to the patent attorney, and we usually will have them on the call. There'll be an initial meeting. There'll be drafts going back and forth as the patent is drafted, to make sure that what's being written up is an accurate reflection of what the invention is, but also the attorneys will get them thinking about what else can it do and how do we broaden this, right? And often we're focused on one solution or one little part of the research, but how do we make this bigger? And after that initial patent is filed, then researchers are involved in sort of keeping us up to date on what's new, what's happening, what are the new developments and the data and examples that are being generated in the same research topic as we go, because it's going to come back around. So it's not just, you don't just file a patent application. We're going to file a provisional, we're going to make another filing in a year, and then it's going to start getting examined at some point. Maybe within that 30 months, we'll get what's called an office action, which is the examiner has looked at it and made comments and told us what we can and can't have. And we need to respond to that. So we need the help of the inventors at that point. It's best if we have the help of the inventors at that point to help us understand the other references that the examiner is giving us and why our technology is different and in what ways and in important ways. So the inventors can be really important at that stage because they understand all the subtleties of why their work is different from someone else's work. And that might be the work that's getting cited by the patent examiner.
I'd also like to follow up, Bob, and take it to the next step of licensing too. When we get that company interest, they're reading this patent, and while they might have a good sense of what it's saying and how they're going to implement it, having the inventors alongside of us as we're discussing the technology with the companies can be very beneficial to help their understanding of the technology and some of those things that haven't worked but are still valuable to know to the company, so they don't pursue avenues that just fundamentally we know already won't work. So having that non-patented or know-how is definitely critical for transferring the successful transfer of the patents over to a company. And as a consequence of that, they have a higher likelihood of success.
Yeah, and to add to that, in many cases, our inventors are interested in forming those relationships with industry partners. And, sometimes the licensing of a technology can be the beginning of a partnership where there's sponsored research for further development or honing a technology to their specific needs. And so, we really value having inventor input, not only for the patenting process, but also for helping us to form those relationships. The companies aren't really interested in talking to the business people, i.e. us. They're interested in talking to the scientists and the inventors. And so, the inventors are very valuable for all stages.
Great. We have one more question. For software, what additional protections would a patent grant over copyright alone?
That's a good question. I think, so again, the copyright protects just that code, just that expression of the idea, that particular software. But there may be an inventive concept behind the software. Maybe the software does something that's never been done before, or it does it in a way that's never been done that way, and it has a lot of advantages. So there may be a patent on that method or that way of doing things, and the software is just one embodiment of that. So the additional protections of a patent grant would be no one else can write software that follows that method without coming up against our patent. So they would need a license to the patent, whereas just the software copyright alone just protects that particular expression of it. And actually, I'd like to, so software patents are not easy to get. Let me just share, I have one slide on this that might be good to look at here. They're tricky. A lot is not patentable, and sometimes it's better if there isn't a patent, but the trick is it's got to be tied, that method has to be tied to a device or a function in the real world. There's this section 101 of the patent law that talks about subject matter that's not even eligible for patent. So you can't patent, the law of gravity, you can't patent natural phenomenon, you can't patent abstract ideas. And this comes into how examiners look at software patents, and they throw them out. They basically say this is an abstract idea, or it's just math and it's just a law of nature, so you can't get a claim for a patent to that. So you have to think about what's done with this information. It has to go beyond just displaying and gathering it, and what are you doing with this info that couldn't be done before, or couldn't be done as well. But we do have some software patents, and in that case, what they do is protect the general idea and this new method, and not just the one expression of it. We can license the patent and the software developed around that idea from UT, all in one package also. So this is not unusual when there's a software patent to license the actual code at the same time.
Yeah, and I'll add something, just kind of an additional note onto that. We actually work with a lot of different attorneys, and we try to specifically pair the right attorney with the technology. And so we've gone through the process, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, of like finding firms and attorneys within those firms that are pretty well versed with what you would actually need to do to overcome that patentability issue as far as abstract idea goes. And so, you know, usually in that particular case, we'll just like get with that attorney and be like, what is needed here? What could we possibly do to be able to protect this, not only through copyrights, but also patents?
That's right. I think, and I'll add, since you brought up these outside attorneys with specific expertise, yeah, that's how we operate with these patent filings. We don't, we have dozens of patent attorneys. They're all outside UT, in patent firms and intellectual property firms that prepare and file these for us. And when we're making a filing decision, we're also making a decision on who should get this, who should we send this to, who has the expertise in this area. And so, yeah, with a software patent, they're looking at that issue very seriously on is it allowable subject matter.
Bob, Kristen, Chris, thank you so much for leading this workshop for us. Everyone, thank you for joining us, and please reach out to OTC at licensing@otc.utexas.edu with any additional questions you might have. We hope you have a great rest of your week and stay warm in this chilly Texas weather that's coming through. Bye, everyone.